Welcome once again, fight fans, to DAZN MMA. Sean O'Connell, Dan Hardy. Big news around UFC 294. You lose a main event, you lose a co-main event, and in steps some replacement fighters that somehow, Dan Hardy, make the card even better. It doesn't happen anywhere else, but in mixed martial arts, you get stories like this every once in a while.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, fair play to the UFC matchmakers on this recovery. I don't know whose idea it was, whether it was the fighters reaching out for the opportunity or the matchmakers going, you know what, let's just give him a call and see how he's doing. Let's see if he'd be interested. Because I mean, for Volk and Usman to jump at these opportunities, and I think both of them are motivated for different reasons and in different ways, and I think they're both bringing strengths and problems to these fights that that are going to be hard for their opponents to deal with. Like, of course, Makhachev preparing for Oliveira and then getting Volkanovski is a different kind of problem. But I feel like the same things that he was preparing for with Oliveira are transferable quite comfortably. And I do feel like he did win the last fight. I've watched it back and scored it myself over the last week, and I just kind of feel like Makhachev is the bigger, better fighter, and he was able to read things that Volk was doing. So we'll see if Volk's made those improvements, but he might be foot on the gas because he's taking it on short notice. And then Usman over 3 rounds up at middleweight. I just think he's going to look healthy and strong. And if Chimaev's rushing, it might be a far more challenging fight than Paulo Costa, who I do feel like he could have exhausted with his wrestling, but maybe not Kamaru Usman.
So Islam Makhachev probably didn't want to have to do the Volk thing again right now, right? But on short notice, you take it. You stay on this Abu Dhabi card, right? I think that we saw some clips last time Makhachev fought Volk, and Volk was the favorite. Volk was the local. Volk was the one that was getting all the cheers and the pop, and Makhachev had to listen while everybody booed him while he was being introduced, right? And Volk afterwards says, next time we'll do it where you can be the favorite. We'll do it in Abu Dhabi, and I'll take the booze. So that's actually going to happen, right? So little foreshadowing there by Alexander Volkanovski. I cannot imagine, and I don't pretend that me and Volk are cut from the same cloth at all, but I cannot imagine seeing someone who has the style that we've seen from Islam Makhachev and going on 12 days notice or whatever. I'll do that for 5 rounds. Yeah, I'll do that again. And Volk's only got so much gas left in the tank, even though I think he's one of the greats and maybe the best pound-for-pound fighter on planet Earth. He's 35 years old. We know the trend when it comes to defending your own titles after age 35. It's not friendly, right? It hasn't gone well for defending champions. And now he's trying to go capture a second belt here at 35. He is different. He's built different. But this is a guy who probably doesn't have that many bullets left in the gun, so to speak. And he's going to use one in a fight that is just like a tough uphill climb because of the timing, the location, the opponent, all of those things. Mad respect to Alexander Volkanovski. Everybody in the game thinks they're a fighter like this. Anybody, anywhere, anytime. We all think that we're like this, but then you get that phone call and very few people are willing to take this. He's different.
Yeah, for sure he is. For sure he is. And that's why you can never count him out, in both of these situations with Usman as well. I do feel like it's a far tougher fight for Volkanovski coming back against Makhachev, because Makhachev's got that previous experience, and I gave the majority of the rounds to Makhachev. I thought he won the first 4, even though there were a couple that were competitive, and Volk did do some good things. I feel like he finished really strong. Like, his 5th round was great. So if his lasting memory of the fight is what I can do in the 5th round, if he starts at that same pace and puts Makhachev under pressure, defends a couple of takedowns, keeps the scramble going, and maybe lands that right hand and hurts him, then this could, be a very, very different fight. But Makhachev was partly in that situation because he'd already done 25 minutes and he'd already been dealing with Volk for 25 minutes and, in my opinion, winning the majority of it. So this, and I've got to imagine Makhachev kind of goes away from that fight and thinks, okay, well, I could have done this better and I got this wrong. And then he's had feedback from, fighters like Khabib around him. Like, he's going to come in supremely conditioned because he was already preparing to fight, but we're already with a preconceived idea of what he's going to experience from Volk, who's maybe not actually done the physical work to make the adjustments that he'll need because of the short notice nature.
In that co-main event, Kamaru Usman is an all-time great, right? Maybe one of the top 3 welterweights that the UFC has ever seen. And now he's making the transition. He's moving up to take on Khamzat Chimaev, who's a scary prospect, right? A scary proposition for anybody, and a guy that a lot of ranked middleweights right now do not want to fight. And so Kamaru Usman stepping in and doing this reflects where he's at in his career, reflects his mentality as a fighter as well. It's incredibly impressive. And it's something that is so unique to the sport of mixed martial arts. You don't get this even in other combat sports. You certainly don't get it in boxing, all right? In boxing, there's all these crossover fights, weight class to weight class fights that we want to see and that we speculate on and we hope we can somehow see happen, and they never do. Or if they do, they happen 10 years after the prime for both fighters, right? This is on 12 days' notice, a guy who's a generational talent stepping in to take on the fight that nobody else wants. Only in mixed martial arts do you get this.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. And this, I think this is a good situation for Usman to come in and impress people. Like you said with Volk, he's got very few bullets left in that gun. Like I think Usman's 36. Like, I don't think it's healthy for him to keep cutting down to 170, and I think most likely he's going to be walking around above 200 pounds anyway. So he's still cutting to make middleweight. And, he gives up a couple of inches in height, but he's got a reach advantage. He's got that strong wrestling base, which might make, Chimaev decide to use a different game plan. Like, I think about it from the fighter's perspective that's taken the short notice. And you go, okay, well, Chimaev was taking on Paulo Costa. So once you're inside the punching range, you've got that body lock. You can just keep recycling that takedown and attacking the neck until you get your bite. But that's an entirely different circumstance with Usman, because he's going to hit you like a brick wall with his takedown defense. Like, is he, I think, statistically the best takedown defense in UFC history. So what could potentially happen here is if Usman's able to defend the takedown for the first 3 minutes, then we get a tired Chimaev that's trading punches with someone that's really sharp, really powerful, has not done a cut all the way down to 170 to refuel, and has taken this with no pressure, knowing that it's only 15 minutes, not 25. The more I think about it, the more I see upsides for Usman stepping in here. And you mentioned boxing. This may be very much like a Mayweather Canelo situation. Like, Usman's got to beat him now, because if he waits around and fights him in 2 years' time, he may be a different fighter entirely at that point.
So you have elite, world-class, top-level fighter taking this thing on short notice in 2 different fights, 2 different weight classes, saving a card, right? I mean, I don't need to keep hammering this same point, but if an injury or some other problem takes your favorite basketball player out of the NBA Finals, or takes your favorite player out of an NFL game or a playoff game or whatever, right? Your team doesn't get to call a generational great to come replace him. Patrick Mahomes is down. Let's get Tom Brady to come in and play quarterback for us. It just doesn't work like that in other sports. And in this sport, to have this happen on such short notice is really a huge victory for the UFC, who often, gets, like, we're as critical as anybody else of that organization. But, like, it shows the depth of talent on your roster, and it shows the culture, the mindset of the fighters who have worked their way to the top of the pyramid. And it's really impressive. So you got these guys taking fights on short notice. And then another person who I put in the same category, and obviously he's from the same camp as Volkanovski, in Israel Adesanya, right? Who's pursued a belt in 2 different weight classes, who obviously was a middleweight champion for a long time. He's stepping away and says he's not going to fight for a while. He said, I think his exact quote was, "I'm not going to fight for a long time." Not retiring, but not going to fight for a long time. So an odd sort of contrast here. What do you make of Israel Adesanya's comments?
I just think it's a reflection of where he is in his career. I mean, carrying the belt must be exhausting. Stepping into fights with the best every time must be exhausting, especially when people expect greatness from you. You know, that's got to carry a burden, and a burden that someone like Volkanovski can very much relate to. Like, there must be a relief that he's going up to lightweight and fighting Makhachev, who is, well, he's bigger and he's stronger and he's the favorite, etc., etc. Like, with the pressure being off, those guys coming in, I think there's a real benefit there. But you know, the last time Adesanya experienced that may have been when he went up to fight Jan Blachowicz, and after that he's had some horrendous fights against Pereira, and you know, of course, the Strickland fight. He must be exhausted, and I think it will do him well to now pump the brakes. And as you said, you know, the phrase was perfect. You know, last few bullets in the gun. Like, what fights is he going to pick off between now and the end of his career to really make his legacy stand out? Instead of staying on this hamster wheel and fighting every 2 or 3 months, which is, you know, it's going to catch up with anybody. And I think, you know, all three of these guys are in that situation. Usman's already doing it with this fight. I think Adesanya's in that same situation where he could quite easily, you know, step into a light heavyweight #1 contenders fight if the opportunity presents itself. And, you know, Volkanovski's doing the same thing here. I'm glad to see him taking some time, and I think that we're going to see a better, more rested and focused version when he comes back.
The thing that gives me pause when he says it, I'm not going to fight for a long time. I want to know what a long time is, because a John Jones long time, right, where you're out for 3 years, I don't think that's good for the sport. I don't think it's good for Adesanya specifically. It works for John Jones because, A, he's the best fighter ever, and also he's going to heavyweight, where you can extend your half-life as a fighter at heavyweight more than you can in any other division, right? The guys are big and they're strong, but they're slow, right? The thing that goes last is the thing that you can still use as a head. Like, your strength is what goes away from you last. It's your speed and your chin and all that stuff. Like, you can still serve yourself well into your late 30s, and as Randy Couture showed us, into your 40s as a UFC heavyweight, right? Not at welterweight, not as a featherweight or a lightweight, right? I don't think as a middleweight either. Like, that's sort of the border. Light heavyweight and heavyweight, you get some of the older guys having success because the speed is not quite so intense, in my opinion, in those two weight classes. But a long time, Israel Adesanya, please come on the show, clarify for us what you mean by I'm not going to fight for a long time. Because if he takes a year off at age 34, he's fine. If he takes 3 years off and he comes back, he's, you know, pursuing whatever else, and he comes back like John Jones did after 3 years away, I just don't think at middleweight, and maybe even at light heavyweight, we'll see what the division looks like then. It gets a little bit scarier the further down the weight classes you go. Maybe he'll come back as a heavyweight, though. I could see Israel Adesanya being like 250.